Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conservation Conversations. My name is Ana Sangronis, and I work for the University of Florida IFAS Extension Service and Florida Sea Grant here in Miami-Dade County. This webinar series is a joint effort between UF IFAS Extension, Florida Sea Grant, and Miami-Dade County Eco Adventures. We will be offering this webinar series every second and fourth Wednesday at 12 noon for the next few months. Thanks for tuning in today. Everyone in this webinar is currently muted, so I ask that you type any questions into the chat box, which will be moderated by my colleague Ed Pritchard and myself. We will have the opportunity to answer questions at the end of the session. The webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent out within the next week. Please follow us on social media, where we will be announcing each month's conversation topics on a continuous basis. If you'd like to instead receive an email reminder with the topics and links to register, please indicate so in the chat box or email me. Now I will turn it over to today's presenter, Kasia Williams of Miami Eco Adventures.
Hello, thank you for joining me today on my presentation, Demystifying Recycling. My name is Kasia Williams, and I am an interpretive program leader with Miami Eco Adventures, which is a part of Miami-Dade County Parks and Open Spaces. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing later. So let's jump right into it. First, I'd like to go over a little bit of the history of recycling just so we can break it down and truly understand it a little bit more. In the pre-1900s, or in the 1800s, there were no blue recycling bins, no sorting, no recycling trucks rumbling down the alley. Recycling as we know it didn't exist, but people were way better at it. There was a motto of use it up, wear it out, make do, or do without. Susan Strazer, the author of Waste and Want, wrote, if the elbows in a shirt wore out, you'd take the sleeves off, turn them inside out, and voila, a new shirt. If a dress went out of style, you'd add a new button or send it back to the dressmaker to fashion a trendier frock. Eventually, the fabric would be turned into a quilt or a rag rug, or just a rag. There were no municipal solid waste disposals, so trash would sit and pile up if you did not find a way to reuse it. People also had a much greater understanding of the value of material goods that we severely lack today. If everything you owned was created by someone in your community, your appreciation and care for that material good would be much greater than how things are done today. The closest thing to a recycling service was the rag man, who would pick up old clothes to make paper. In the 1930s is when the plastic industry really began. John Wesley Hyatt invented celluloid, which is derived from cellulose and cotton, as an alternative to ivory for billiard balls. Celluloid appeared at a time when the country was changing to an industrial one. Although the material wasn't quite cut out for billiard balls, it did make a great comb. For all its significance, celluloid was mainly used for novelties and small decorative things like the comb due to its labor-intensive and volatile nature. Bakelite was the truly first synthetic plastic, created as a replacement for shellac, and it paved the way for the world of plastic as we know it today. Unlike celluloid, bakelite could be molded and machined into nearly anything. The 1920s and 30s saw an outpouring of new materials from labs around the world, including polystyrene, which is the base of styrofoam, nylon, and polyethylene. Now that necessities and luxuries could be inexpensively mass-produced, it seemed like plastic was the new era of abundance. Now we get into World War II, which is the age of plastic. Much of the new plastics discovered in the 1930s were taken over by the military during the course of World War II. Parachutes, ropes, body armor, and much more were created from the newfound materials. Back at home, housewives participated in the efforts as well. They recycled nylons, tin cans, cooking fats, and even the tin in toothpick tubes for the war effort. Citizens held scrap drives to collect materials, and national promotion through posters and advertisements helped drive the movement. Now we get into the post-war era. After experiencing the Great Depression and then World War II, Americans were ready to spend again, and much of what they bought was made of plastic. Newly flush Americans and returning GIs were ready to dive into this almost utopian world of colors, Tupperware, Teflon, Barbie dolls, and more new products than they knew what to do with. A nation of consumers was born, one driven by the conveniences and comforts of modern life. However, this optimistic view on plastics did not last long. In the 1960s, when plastic debris in the ocean was first discovered. Environmentalists such as Racine Carson were sounding alarms. Oil spills were occurring and people were raising concerns about pollution. The environmental movement began to take hold over the nation, and recycling was seen as a personal way of helping the environment. At the time, there were only a few private recycling centers, and so-called hippies would cart everything there themselves. Plastic began to be seen as cheap and flimsy, and its reputation dropped. In the 1970s and 80s, the reason for recycling shifted. Americans now recycle to deal with the massive amounts of waste that had come with the second half of the 20th century. Disposable items, soda cans, cheap, broken household goods began piling up to the point that collection groups were created in cities and volunteers were called on to pick up trash in national parks. The first publicly funded recycling programs began. Another, more sinister shift was also occurring. Companies such as the American Can Company began running PSAs for recycling. People start pollution. People can stop it. This successfully painted recycling as a problem for consumers to deal with, rather than for the companies who manufacture these items to mitigate, framing it as something that taxpayers should pay for. In the 1990s, more than 10,000 communities had some sort of public recycling collection program. Curbside recycling began to pop up as well. Companies had successfully gotten the nation to invest in the infrastructure, pay for labor, and have consumers collect and sort products, only to buy it back at less than a fraction to reuse. The same parallel can be seen in bottle return deposits. In the beginning of the 20th century, they were commonplace, and consumers expected getting some of their money back as part of purchasing a glass bottle. Containers would go back and forth between consumers and producers around 20 times. Eventually, that too fell to the wayside as glass became less used and the idea of consumer recycling became one of a selfless act, done for the good of nature. And that brings us to modern day recycling. Today, more often than not, businesses and homes will faithfully put out their blue recycling bins every week, filled to the brim with cans and bottles. Recycling even has its own holiday on November 15th, recognized by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. The ease of single-stream recycling has helped the recycling rate jump from less than 7% in the 1960s to a little over 35% today. Recycling supports thousands of jobs and allows for all ages and walks of life to feel as though they are helping protect the environment. And now I'll explain a little bit about what single-stream recycling is. A survey done by the American Forest and Paper Association found that between 2005 and 2014, these single-stream programs went from covering 29% of American communities to 80%. Prior to the early 2000s, recycling was sorted separately at the home. Perhaps some of you remember watching Mr. Rogers and Mr. McFeely sort through aluminum cans and cardboard before their trip to the recycling plant. With the invention of modern-day single-stream recycling, the public can toss all of their recyclables in one receptacle and not have to deal with keeping track of multiple bags or bins. Single-stream recycling has also made it cost-effective for waste haulers. There's fewer staff and fewer trucks, equaling to more effective pickups and less fuel to run. With the popularization of single-stream recycling, a whopping 66% of people surveyed by Poll Harris said that they wouldn't recycle at all if it wasn't easy to do. Some experts have credited with single-stream recycling with the increase of materials being recycled, and with the growth of single-stream recycling, it also tracks the growth of recycling overall in the United States. However, while there are many advantages to single-stream recycling, it has not consistently yielded positive results in the recycling industry, which I will discuss more in depth in a few slides. Now we'll get a little bit more into Miami-Dade County specifically. The solid waste management provides waste collection and recycling services to Miami-Dade County and the cities of Aventura, Cutler Bay, Doral, Miami Gardens, Miami Lakes, Opa-locka, Palmetto Bay, Pinecrest, and Sunny Isles Beach. The solid waste management owns and operates 3 landfills and 3 regional transfer stations for waste disposal, and owns the resource recovery facility where waste is converted into energy that is used to power the plant and exported to the power grid. Recycling in single-family homes is collected once every 2 weeks from 68-gallon bins. In contrast, garbage is collected 2 times a week. Commercial recycling is mandatory in Miami-Dade County, and business owners in Miami-Dade County must provide a recycling program for their employees and tenants. If they do not, they can face fines and the wrath of Mother Earth. Around Miami-Dade County, there are 13 neighborhood trash and recycling centers. What each center accepts can differ, so it's best to check before going to drop any materials off. Miami-Dade County follows the simple 5 rules of recycling. Here are the simple 5 that Miami-Dade County accepts as recycling. First is paper. Clean and dry newspapers, magazines, catalogs, telephone books, printer paper, and all other office paper without wax liners. Also cardboard, such as packing boxes, cereal boxes, gift boxes. Just make sure to flatten your boxes before placing it in your cart. Cans, such as steel and aluminum food and beverage cans, are also accepted. Cartons, like drink boxes, juice cartons, and milk cartons. And of course, bottles, plastic and glass, milk, water, soda, and shampoo. Just make sure to flatten and replace the cap. All these items need to be clean and free of food and debris to be accepted. Numbers on plastic are no longer useful indicators of recyclability. Miami-Dade County recycles plastic bottle containers regardless of the number listed. So how does recycling work? A lot of us just take out our bins, see it get picked up, and then that's as far as our thinking goes. It's out of sight, it's out of mind, and of course, it's probably being put to good use, right? Recycling and waste companies actually foot the cost of recycling in certain areas. They factor in the price of a truck, a driver, fuel, maintenance, and more. Once they budget those costs out, they give the county a price for their services. The county pays a per household fee and receives a set of money for each ton the company collects. This bidding is why only half the cities in Miami-Dade use recycling services offered by the county. If the price isn't right, cities will create their own recycling programs. For example, the city of Coral Gables. Trucks come by, pick up the recycling bins, and send the materials to a transfer station. At the transfer station, workers try their best to sort out and take away items that can't be recycled. From there, separate trucks venture off into Reuter's recycling facility in Pembroke Pines, one of the largest recycling facilities in the United States. This facility is owned by the Waste Management Incorporated, which is one of the 3 cities that Miami-Dade County pays to handle recycling. Hundreds of tons of recyclable materials go through Reuter's every day. Miami has been under contract with the Waste Management since 2008 and will do so until 2023. The Waste Management will then find buyers for recycled materials both domestically and internationally. These markets are commodity-driven and subject to the ebb and flow of market demands. Over the past few years, the demand has been impacted by increased supply and a decrease in end markets for collected materials. According to Waste Management, 2 years ago, the average price for mixed recovered materials that were commonly collected was $100 per ton. The average price of mixed recyclables for Q1 of 2019 was $56.50 $56.90 per ton, resulting in a 70% decrease in the value of mixed material goods. This brings me to my next point and the real reason for me wanting to create this presentation. I'm sorry, give me 1 second. And that is the reality of recycling. According to Florida's Department of Environmental Protection, only 18% of Miami-Dade County's waste is actually recycled. That's one of the lowest recycling rates in the state. As a comparison, Broward County recycles 33% of their waste, while Palm Beach County recycles a whopping 45% of their waste. Oftentimes, recycled material will sit at a facility, incurring costs and building up. At worst, it will be thrown into a landfill, making our diligent efforts and good intentions a wasted effort. There is very little revenue, if any, generated and returned for recovered materials that have been collected and processed. The tipping fees for disposal at landfills are much lower than the cost to recycle, and many cities are left with the decision whether to continue curbside recycling at a much higher cost or dispose of this material at a lower cost. So why does Miami-Dade have such a low rate? It's because of this thing called wish cycling. Waste management spokesperson Dawn attributes Miami-Dade's low number of recycling to simply not being sold. Despite the increase in numbers of Americans overall recycling, it turns out we kind of suck at it. An overwhelming amount of people simply have no idea what can be recycled. People want to do the right thing for the government, Dawn says. They're kind of wish cycling. Oh, I hope this can be recycled. Let me put it in and they'll figure it out. Dawn says that contamination is the largest issue the recycling industry faces. If the material is contaminated, then no one will want to buy it and it cannot be sold. Waste management in Miami-Dade County receives material at a 25% contamination. The biggest culprits: greasy pizza boxes, thin plastics, bubble wrap, styrofoam, and most overwhelmingly, plastic bags. A contaminated load can shut down operations of an entire processing facility and ruin the whole load of good recyclable material. The Florida legislation, through the Energy, Climate Change, and Economic Security Act of 2008, had established a statewide recycling goal of 75% by 2020. Florida did reach the interim goals in 2012 and 2014. However, in 2016, we did not meet our goal of 60%. The recycling rate has continued to decline since then. Florida's 2018 recycling rate was 49%, falling much short of the goal of 70%. This drop can largely be attributed to a drop in the reported amount of construction and demolition material recycled in 2008, as shown in this graph by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. We can see that increase beginning around 2008, and then in 2016 and 17, it starts to level off and begins to decline. However, there was also another monumental hit to recycling that occurred in 2018. And that was China's ban on US recycling. China used to be the biggest buyer of recycled material. The US came to rely on the country to take and process about 70% of our used paper and 40% of our used plastic. In 2013, China announced Operation Green Fence, which was a crackdown on our poorly sorted shipments of used paper and plastic that arrived from America contaminated with trash. The work of sorting out this garbage had fallen to Chinese families who suffered from impoverishment and appalling working conditions. But the US did not listen. Then, in January 2018, China passed a new law requiring that all recycled material imported into the country be no more than 0.5% contaminated, banning imports of what they called loathsome foreign garbage. Do you remember that level of contamination in Miami-Dade? 25%. And just like that, Recycling as we know it was dead. The Wall Street Journal reported how quickly and severe the change was. In 2017, the US exported roughly 14.5 million metric tons of scrap recyclables to China. Within the year, it had dropped to 9.4 million. And here we can just see the decline in graphs of recycled objects. This 2019 report by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection shows some really shocking numbers. A 1% drop in the already under-recycled category of plastic bottles, from 2% in Miami-Dade to only 1% in 2019. A slight increase in 2018 from 4 to 9% due to an increase in the demand of aluminum. However, last year that percent declined to 7% of Miami-Dade. So that means that currently, right now, all the recycled bottles, all those soda cans that we're putting in the recycling bins, only 1% of those plastic bottles are being recycled, and only 7% of those aluminum cans. But the most noticeable drop was in steel cans, from a high of 79% in Miami-Dade County in 2017 to 4% in 2018. And last year in 2019, 2%. And this is what it's looking now in the current state of affairs. Governor Ron DeSantis has signed a bill, HB 73, into law following passage into early 2020. This bill requires Florida counties and municipalities to address the non-hazardous contamination in recyclables. Under this legislation, haulers are not required to transport items that are contaminated recycling materials and will not be required to process these materials. Overall, this bill aims to reduce the amount of contamination arriving at facilities and therefore reduce costs. Contaminated material coming into a facility must be hauled to a landfill, which results in an estimated $1,000 per incident and increasing the likelihood that the material will not be bought. There has also been a push to follow the county's 2014 Solid Waste Management Master Plan, which found that 50% of the country's garbage stream is potentially recyclable. Educating the public about what can and cannot be recycled will be incredibly important in these next 3 years. As of now, there is no plan in place after our 2023 contract with the Solid Waste Management ends. If things do not change, recycling could be a thing of the past. And most importantly, we need to vote. Government officials need to start holding corporations accountable for producing unrecyclable products and leaving the public to figure it out. Because companies don't bear the cost of disposal, they have no incentive to manufacture products out of materials that will be easier to recycle. When in doubt, just throw it out. Some big issues that contaminate our recycled objects right now, or recycled material right now, are things like plastic bags. Don't place your recyclable in plastic bags, and don't put loose plastic bags in the recycling cart. They clog up machinery and cause a number of issues. Instead, bring these to retail stores that accept used plastic bags, such as Publix or Whole Foods. Another one is pizza boxes. Pizza boxes may be made of cardboard, but the grease on them makes them unrecyclable. Put these in the trash. Paper or cardboard soiled with liquid or food waste. Make sure to rinse off and dry products before putting them in your recycling bin. Having food spillover can contaminate your entire bin and potentially even the entire truck. Certain plastics, such as cups, utensils, plates, clamshell takeout containers, foam products, egg cartons, trays, wide mouth opening products such as margarine or butter tubs, all yogurt cups and plastic containers. Even if a product has a recycle symbol on it, that does not mean it's recyclable. Check the Miami-Dade website to find the full list of recyclable objects. Lastly, textiles, such as clothing, shoes, bedding, pillows. Take these to a clothing donation place or just throw them away. And also, don't forget the saying and the order of the saying: reuse, Reusing or repurposing a product within the home will ensure the material was used to its full potential before being disposed and can even save us money in the home. Reducing the amount of products we use and buy will first minimize the resources used to create them and also presents us with less of a problem when it comes time to dispose. And lastly comes recycling. As we have learned today, recycling is not the saving grace that people once thought it was. Now that we know better, it is up to us to do better. And of course, we can talk about the most sustainable product, which is one that you don't buy. The best way to fix recycling is persuading people to buy less stuff, which would also reduce the waste created when these products are made. Make a conscious choice to be smarter about what you purchase, avoiding plastic bottles and straws and other unnecessary disposable goods. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening and learning. And if you have any questions, now is the time to ask them.
All right, thanks, Kasia. I'm actually gonna go ahead, guys, and launch a poll real quick that Kasia had thought to put together and asking 3 simple questions. So please use your mouse to indicate your response. The first is, do you recycle, yes or no? Number 2, do you believe that you recycle correctly? Always, mostly, sometimes, or no? And number 3, do you know what happens to your recycling? So thank you for going ahead and sharing your responses. They are anonymous, so please feel free to be honest, and hopefully if perhaps you weren't recycling as best as you could have been before, maybe that will change now as a result of learning about all this really interesting information that Kasia just shared. We'll give it just another minute or 2. And then I'll ask you all for one more really easy poll, just so we can know where everybody is watching and listening from and how many people were participating.